Oseo.
Oseo.
I start with a Cherokee greeting and wave the great feather for the good of it. That summons the spirits. You know, I'm saying under the auspices of Coyote, my vowed interest in this subject is for woman to redeem her lunar ancestry. And so I have a way of representing that for this talk. If you can come over here and look at this. By way of this, I'm saying this represents the moon, you know, the lunar ancestry. And what I have in it, this is a little figure. It's very, very ancient. It's an owl woman. It's from southern Mexico. And talk about redeeming. She was rescued from the cistern whale there. They call it Coyote here. And it's made of some kind of metal, brass, bronze, or something like that. You know, it's very old, but it is, you know, a woman owl or owl woman there. So that would be her symbol, you know, for woman's lunar ancestry. And speaking of lunar, here, Alma. Alma is the ancient, let's say, goddess of the moon, way back there in Eastern Mediterranean. And the word that's come out of it by way of Latin is alma mater. And that's what I'm starting with here. To go up here, and here is my illustration, my painting here. You might recognize if you've seen my talk from Coyote Talks from last week. This is Pyramid Lake, and this is another one of my shields for Pyramid Lake, and what I'm wanting to convey to you of my experience and my feelings about that. So you can focus on that while I'm going to deliver this. Pyramid Lake, my alma mater. By coming together with her, which is the Great Lake, the infinite reservoir of something that shimmers. It gives me some particular experience of insight and discoveries, bringing about a special lakescape of ancient memory. By way of my creative involvement with the lake, she gradually emerged as my she of Pyramid Lake, and maybe she is the not yet recognized spirit of this great blue lake. A lake which contains some real currents. She is as clear as the lake's water, even while she turns over into another hue of blue. Nothing can cast a pall over her. She is deep and not easily understood. It is because of these characteristics that she is known as the Great Lake. It's all about movement. In her current, I move with a buoyant imagination. It is a means of real spiritual realization. This lake is her presence to be cultivated for sacred knowledge and the relation of her spirit. P.S. from the Lunar Light Sutra. I'm saying in Sanskrit, asana taha sukham harade nimajjati. That means for one who is mindful of her, then with ease he is steeped in her lake. Okay. They come back to me. Now I had introduced there, last week that there is evidence of Egyptian, and I should say Egyptian and Libyan. You have a culture across North Africa that includes Egypt and North Africa, that in the ancient times, all of North Africa, the Greeks called Libya. And Libya is a Greek rendering for the inherent goddess there, Lamia. And people from that region have come over to this country long ago, maybe many more than one time. So there is succession. And so some of the things that make that evidence I had talked about last week. So one of the things, if you can come from here over to this figure here, this is painted on the tufa there at Pyramid Lake. It's a very particular structure of tufa. It's about breast high, and it reminds me, it's curved like the inside of a nautilus shell. And inside this is painted in red, just as I have figured it here. And what it is the ancient recognized symbol of who the Greeks call Athena. Athena. And what it is a symbol of is the double valve mollusk, or the scallop. So I put a scallop in there to show you that. That's what this is. So that definitely gives us a view of the Eastern Mediterranean and Libyan presence, here in this region long ago. And other evidences there that have been painted all over. If you can go over here to this. This is my picture. This is a gallery print of my painting. The painting is very, very large, and what I've titled it is the Sphinx of Pyramid Lake, because from this angle I've seen a photo of the Sphinx in Egypt and that resembles this, so I titled that. However, to other people in ancient times saw it too, because there are Egyptian paintings, coherent Egyptian paintings in red all over this that I have translated and replicated. So this is what we're calling the Sphinx of Pyramid Lake. However, thinking of it as male, because the one that everybody has seen pictures of, the head on that has been a later addition, remodeled of a pharaoh's head. But other people have seen it a different way. There is such a sphinx is a Greek word, but it has been applied, to other images around there. So there are female sphinxes, and female sphinxes also included in the paintings that are Egyptian here. So that's one way that I'm making a point of that. Then you come back to me and say, this lake and the lake that's alongside of it, that's called Winnemucca. Now it's a dry lake because the Americans had cut off the waterway that continued to feed that lake. But that lake is also, because of the archaeology, known to have been inhabited for 11,000 years continuously. And perhaps earlier than that, but that's what the archaeology has revealed. And there are huge monuments there. And those monuments are definitely in the area of North Africa and so forth, so that we can have all of that. Now, I said the name Libya is Greek for Lamia. We can get this kind of a list of names. So you have Lamia, called Libya, and you also have Athena, which is a Greek misrendering of an Egyptian name for her. So her name is Net or Neith, but what they mistranslated was Het Net, meaning the shrine of Neith. She is the same goddess as Lamia, and there's other names there. There was once a huge lake. It must have been formed by moisture coming from the glaciers north of the Mediterranean. And that lake, has come to be called, Triton, actually from the inherent, again, goddess is the way I'm going to describe it, of Tritos. All of these names here are all speaking of the same, something that's been deified, that we're calling goddess here. So all of that is incumbent here, like that. And so one of those that's referred to in here is Medusa. Most people know the story about Medusa, and that the Greek hero Perseus, beheaded her and gave her head to Athena. So it's very odd mixture there, since Athena and Medusa and Libya are all one and the same. They're the same person. But what did happen was that the Greeks, like killer bees entering into the Mediterranean, were raiding, attacking any of the temples or shrines that belonged to the feminine. And in this case, this was the one that was in North Africa, in Libya. And there, the person that he assassinated and decapitated most likely was the priestess of her shrine there. And why I'm going to say that is to come to this illustration here of Medusa. The illustration I have is actually taken from a sculpture of Medusa that I've figured here. And then you're seeing this here that I've added to it. Now, as the stories and legends have come, of course, as the men invaded everywhere, they demonized everything of women and of the goddess, including that she had snakes for hair. Now, this woman was probably the priestess of the temple. She may have even worn a mask, and she's African. And in the African, Bob Marley popularized, the hairdo called, dreadlocks. In Africa is zijapa. And zijapa, this kind of keeping your locks, long and curly and twisted like that, denoted, spiritual power, a spiritual presence, and probably Rastafarians still think that way. So that's what I'm illustrating here, that the goddess with the snake heads that he killed really was a priestess with some kind of hairdo of, dreadlocks like that. So that's the way that I had portrayed that. But it's also a clue to the way that the demonization took hold and how it had taken over into our time in reference to these ancient stories and myths. So that's why I'm including all of that in here. Here, with this figure here, you're going to say, well, that's a mermaid, one of these female people who have fish bodies, fish tails like that. While there's no evidence in what has remained at Pyramid Lake that the people living there have known her as that, everything that I'm saying about her suggests to me that she is there. And that's why I've given this to, make that more palatable here. And here, this image that I have of a fish, this is actually from a petroglyph in Hawaii. Now you can guess that the Polynesians had very much to do with fish, and this was a very good illustration for me to have this sort of segue into what I really want to emphasize here is the fish. And if you come over here to this figure, you might recognize that this is Moana. Moana because a movie was made about Moana for her. Now Claudia had some exchange with the producers of that movie, which are very helpful. They had, assembled or hired anthropologists, from around, the Pacific world, so that they amalgamated from all of Polynesia, the myths and legends and so forth of, their ancient ancestors and that world. And so the movie was ingenious in that that this figure called Moana means ocean or the sea, and she personifies that synthesis, of the Polynesian culture, which is very revealing, because that culture for most European Americans has been repressed by the same agents that repressed Native American culture. So that's there. But she, personifies more than that. She personifies the Great Lake. She is Moana Nui. And that Moana is my determinant. she is always moving, and moving in the immortal and deep current. So she's very necessary there. Also, I have to remind you, from being at Pyramid Lake and the antiquity there, to come down here to this figure that I have here. I've made a model of this. All of us who have been there in Nevada know of this figure. It was there in a restaurant called Moe's, and he had an Indian museum. And he lived out there, he had a ranch out there at Winnemucca, and he found things. And he had this in there. It's very heavy, it's very thick, it's made of stone, a light colored stone, like this. I don't know what you call that stone, but it's like this. And nobody knows what it was, but I know what it was, because I have studied ancient Greece. It is exactly a model of a figure that's from the ancient Cyclades Island. The Cyclades Island, or group of islands, is exactly off of kind of southern Greece, I call it that way. And they became famous. Their figures, I have one made out of marble, different kinds of colors of marble. That the first page was looked like violin shape, like that. But this was earlier. This one is from 6,000 or 7,000 years old. This is found there in the region of Pyramid Lake. So that also gives us some idea of the culture that was circulating in that region at that time, along with other paintings and artifacts there. And when I come over here to this figure, this is a Shuabati, Egyptian Shuabati, surmounted by a fish, so that this way she could represent the fish goddess, Hatmayat, Hatmayat meaning foremost among the fish. And I had last week, talked a lot about the Egyptians' regard and veneration for fish and different kinds of fish. And I have here looks from India. These were before the red powder and the yellow powder. That's what it looks like. But it's in the shape of a fish. Here. And going along with that, here up here, this is also a rendering, I'm trying to say, of the goddess of the fish, Matsya. Matsya in India, it's called Matsya Avatara. Very, very ancient, and still very much regarded, because this fish here is her. This here, you see she has a ring for her nose, and she has the bindi on her forehead, and I have a visage of her here. So this is from India, and this is Matsya Avatara here. And then I rendered this to speak of her, and that this garland, she also in later times becomes the avatar of Vishnu. And this garland here is Vanmala. Vanmala is meant to be wildflowers, and is kind of a badge of divinity. So I have her in that way here. They can go way over here to look at this piece here. This is a name. It actually means Yoni Kumbha. Yoni Kumbha meaning the swimming yoni here. And up here I put the zodiac sign for Kumbha, for water. It looks very much like the one for in Egypt. Looks very similar to that. But here, this is the Viseka Pisces that I have made here. And it's very interesting. This necklace piece, we call it. This is red coral. The red coral is the blood of Medusa, is how that is figured. So, the whole ghastly tale of, her assassination, by the Greek hero Perseus, has, some other side effects. One of is blood. And so this red coral necklace with blood, and the pendant on here is extremely ancient jade, and the form of it, this is also a form of her, an early form of her that looks kind of dragon-like, kind of has a long nose and a hook on it, and that also becomes Makara. She also gets figured as a Makara. So that's a very important piece to illustrate this theme of the swimming yoni. We have that here. And here we're talking all about fish, so as many fish as I could find. Here's a tropical fish, is what I can call it. It's been painted on a palm leaf, palm frond, whatever you might call it. It could be from the Caribbean or it could be from the South Seas, but it's very attractive. But what I have under it is, this is a carved fish hook. It's been carved from a heavy shell, and this is a Maori fish hook. The fish hook is usually called Maui's fish hook. The Hawaiians wear them as amulets like that. This one is very interesting. So the fish hook, what I'm trying to say, kind of took on a special, like almost a deity like that. And so that's why I have that here for that. So all these things that I've been able to assemble here to speak of what we're calling a lunar ancestry. Of course, water and the moon and the fish, all has very, very much to do from the beginning of humanity about her, woman, feminine, goddess, any of those things. So let me round this up, with this reading here. Tideway. In the clearer current, little trout imitate the shadow of the heron. Wind wrinkles the quiet pool. The trout breathe. The deer drinks. Swimmer, the salmon, names the fish that returns to the river of its birth to spawn and then to die. Not a riddle or a myth, really, but a picture of our lives, of our own lives, the roundness of it, fish returning year after year. This is the same like way the spirit travels back into life after the severance of death. This roundness of living, dying, living. Now I am the swimmer who runs with rain and moon and salt wind tide, river and falls, and sweet pebble water. Swimmer, the salmon who comes with the moon. Thank you.